Sometimes the only way people learn your value is when they lose access to you. And that's exactly what the man we're about to talk about learned. The suburbs of New York City were quiet that night. Rows of neatly trimmed houses stretched beneath the glow of streetlights, while the distant sounds of traffic drifted through the cool evening air. Inside one of those homes sat Ethan Parker, a 32-year-old man who had spent most of his life trying to make other people happy. If someone asked his friends to describe him, they would call him kind. If someone asked his co-workers, they would call him reliable. If someone asked his family, they would call him dependable. Nobody had anything bad to say about Ethan Parker. That should have been a good thing. Yet somehow it wasn't, because Ethan had slowly learned a painful truth about being everyone's favorite person. People loved what he did for them far more than they loved him. At least that was how it felt. For years, Ethan pushed that feeling aside whenever it surfaced. Whenever a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that something wasn't right, he found a way to silence it. Everyone gets busy. People have their own lives. Don't overthink it. Those had become his favorite excuses. He used them whenever his friends forgot important dates. He used them whenever his family canceled plans. He used them whenever his girlfriend Linda seemed more interested in everyone else than him. The excuses made life easier. The excuses helped him sleep at night. The excuses protected the illusion. Tonight, however, the illusion was beginning to crack. Ethan sat alone on the couch in his living room, staring at decorations that suddenly felt ridiculous. Blue and silver balloons floated near the ceiling. A banner stretched across the wall. Paper streamers hung from furniture. A chocolate cake sat untouched on the dining table. Beside it rested several carefully wrapped gifts. They weren't gifts from other people. Ethan had bought them for everyone else. He always did things like that, even on his own birthday. The food he had prepared filled the house with the smell of roasted chicken, garlic butter, and baked vegetables. Hours earlier, he had been excited while cooking it all. Now it felt like evidence of effort nobody would ever see. His gaze shifted toward the wall clock. 11:48 p.m. 12 minutes until midnight. 12 minutes until his birthday ended. 12 minutes until 4 years of dating Linda officially reached their anniversary, and he was spending both occasions alone. The television remained off. The music he had prepared for the evening never played. The extra chairs remained empty. The dining table remained untouched. Hours earlier, he had imagined laughter filling the room. His mother arguing with his sister over dessert. Marcus making terrible jokes. Linda sitting beside him while everyone celebrated. Instead, silence occupied every seat. The silence wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was familiar, and that was what made it hurt. This wasn't the first time. Not even close. Ethan picked up his phone and unlocked it. The screen immediately lit up with unread messages. Dozens of them. Most contained birthday wishes. Most promised they were on their way. Most sounded sincere. That was the frustrating part. They always sounded sincere. His mother had texted at 6 o'clock. Running a little late, we'll be there soon. His sister had sent one at 7. Traffic is crazy, save me some cake. Marcus texted at 8. Bro, 20 more minutes. Another friend promised 9. Now it was almost midnight. Nobody had arrived. Ethan stared at the messages for several seconds before locking the screen again. A bitter laugh escaped him. Not because the situation was funny, because it was predictable. The worst part wasn't that they disappointed him. The worst part was that a small part of him had genuinely believed tonight would be different. He leaned back against the couch and closed his eyes. Unfortunately, that only brought back memories. A few months earlier, he had published his first book, Lone Poet, a project that had taken him nearly 3 years to complete. 3 years of writing before work, 3 years of editing after work, 3 years of sacrificing weekends. The launch event had been one of the proudest moments of his life. At least it should have been. Weeks before the event, his friends had promised to attend. His family promised to attend. Linda promised to attend. He had reserved seats for all of them. He remembered arriving early that day. He remembered checking his phone every few minutes. He remembered looking toward the entrance each time the door opened. He remembered the growing feeling in his stomach as seat after seat remained empty. The excuses started arriving shortly afterward. Work emergency, family emergency, forgot the date, car trouble, feeling sick. Something always came up. Something always seemed more important. The event eventually ended with Ethan sitting alone at a table signing books for strangers, while the seats reserved for the people he loved remained empty. At the time, he had smiled. At the time, he had told everyone it was fine. At the time, he had even thanked them for trying. That was who Ethan was: understanding, patient, forgiving. The problem was that everyone knew it. They knew he wouldn't yell. They knew he wouldn't argue. They knew he wouldn't hold grudges. Most importantly, they knew he would always be there tomorrow, no matter how many times they disappointed him today. A notification pulled him from his thoughts. Then another. And another. The phone vibrated repeatedly against the coffee table. Midnight had finally arrived. The clock rolled over. His birthday was officially over. So was his anniversary. Not a single person had shown up. Ethan stared at the clock for several moments. Something inside him shifted. The change was subtle, like a crack forming deep inside a frozen lake. For years, he had defended everyone. For years, he had explained away their behavior. For years, he had convinced himself that intentions mattered more than actions. Tonight, he found himself asking a question he had avoided for a long time. If these people truly loved me, why do I always feel alone? The answer frightened him, because deep down, he already knew it. Another notification appeared. The excuses had finally arrived. Ethan unlocked the phone. The first message came from Linda.
I'm sorry, babe. Kayla fell sick and I had to work her shift. I forgot to tell you. I'll make it up to you when I get back, okay?
Ethan read the message twice, then a third time. Not because he believed it, because it sounded familiar. He opened older conversations. Within minutes, he found almost identical messages. Different dates, different reasons, same outcome. Missed dinner, missed plans, missed promises, missed milestones. Always followed by the same words. I'll make it up to you. Somehow that day never came. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't reading their messages emotionally. He was reading it logically. And logic was painting an ugly picture. He set the phone down and rubbed his face. The house felt strangely different now. Not emptier. Clearer. Like someone had finally cleaned a dirty window he had spent years looking through. He thought about Linda. He thought about his friends. He thought about his family. Then he thought about himself. That was when another uncomfortable realization surfaced. Maybe the problem wasn't just them. Maybe it was him too. Not because he deserved their treatment. Nobody deserved that. But because he had spent years teaching people that his boundaries didn't matter. Every time he accepted disrespect, he taught them it was acceptable. Every time he said, "It's okay," he taught them there were no consequences. Every time he prioritized their needs above his own, he showed them exactly where he stood. Last place. The realization hurt, but it also felt strangely freeing, because if his choices helped create this situation, then his choices could change it too. For the first time that night, Ethan sat forward. His eyes drifted toward the untouched cake, the empty chairs, the decorations, the evidence of another disappointment. Then he looked at the messages waiting on his phone. One by one. Excuse after excuse, reason after reason, promise after promise. Suddenly, he wasn't angry anymore. He was tired. And tired people eventually stop carrying things they were never meant to carry in the first place. A slow breath escaped him. Then another. The silence returned to the room. But this time, it felt different. Because for the first time in years, Ethan Parker wasn't wondering what he needed to do to make everyone else happy. He was wondering what would happen if he stopped trying. The following morning, Ethan woke up to sunlight pouring through the gaps in his curtains. For a brief moment, he forgot what day it was. Then his eyes landed on the decorations scattered around the living room, and everything came rushing back. The untouched cake still sat on the dining table. Half-deflated balloons floated near the ceiling. Paper plates remained stacked exactly where he had left them. The sight should have made him angry. Instead, He felt strangely calm, not happy, not healed, just calm. The kind of calm that came after finally accepting a truth you had spent years avoiding. His phone rested on the coffee table. Normally, checking it would have been the first thing he did every morning. Today, he ignored it. Instead, he walked into the kitchen and prepared breakfast. Eggs, toast, and coffee. Simple. As he sat alone at the counter, his thoughts drifted back through the years. Looking back now, the signs seemed embarrassingly obvious. There was the time Marcus called him at 2 in the morning because his car broke down nearly 40 minutes away. Ethan had gotten out of bed immediately, driven across the city, paid for the tow truck, and stayed until everything was sorted. A month later, Ethan needed a ride home after his own car was being repaired. Marcus never answered. The excuse came 3 days later.
Sorry, bro, been busy.
There was the time his sister needed money to cover rent. Ethan emptied most of his savings to help her. When he later mentioned wanting to buy a better laptop for his writing, she laughed and told him he should be more financially responsible. Then there was Linda. His chest tightened slightly at the thought of her. At first, their relationship had felt perfect. She was outgoing where he was reserved, confident where he was uncertain, talkative where he was quiet. For a while, their differences felt complementary. Over time, however, those same differences became problems. Linda loved attention. Ethan loved peace. Linda enjoyed being surrounded by people. Ethan preferred small gatherings. Linda constantly chased excitement. Ethan valued stability. The arguments started small. She complained that he never wanted to go out. He explained that crowded clubs simply weren't his thing. She called him boring. At first, she said it jokingly. Then she started saying it seriously. Then she started saying it in front of other people. Every time it happened, Ethan laughed along. Every time it bothered him. Every time he pretended it didn't. The worst part was that he couldn't remember the last time she had apologized for anything. The relationship seemed to operate under an unwritten rule. When Linda made mistakes, Ethan understood. When Ethan made mistakes, Ethan apologized. The realization left a bitter taste in his mouth. His phone suddenly vibrated. He glanced at the screen. Linda calling. Ethan stared at the name without moving. The call continued ringing. For years, he would have answered before the second ring. Instead, he watched it ring until it stopped. A few seconds later, another call came, then another, then a text.
Why are you ignoring me?
Another followed immediately.
Are you mad?
Then another.
Seriously, Ethan, answer your phone.
He placed the device face down on the table. Something about the messages made him laugh. Not because they were funny, because of the irony. For years, he had waited hours, sometimes days, for responses from the people in his life. Now a few unanswered calls had suddenly become an emergency. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Marcus. Ethan almost smiled. He already knew how this conversation would go. The call ended. A text appeared.
Bro, you awake? Need a favor?
There it was, not "How was your birthday?" not "Sorry I couldn't make it?" Not "Are you okay?" Just a favor. Ethan opened the message and continued reading.
Got into a little situation. Can you send me 500? I'll pay you back Friday.
Friday. The same Friday Marcus had been promising for almost 2 years. Ethan locked his phone. A few moments later, another notification appeared. His mother.
Morning, sweetheart. Sorry we missed yesterday. Something came up. We should celebrate another day.
Another day, another promise, another postponement. Ethan found himself wondering how many another days had passed already. Dozens, hundreds. At some point, another day simply became never. After breakfast, he carried a trash bag into the living room and began taking down the decorations. One by one, the reminders disappeared. The balloons, the streamers, the banner, the paper cups. Each item landed inside the bag with a soft rustle. As he worked, he noticed something unusual. He didn't feel disappointed anymore. The disappointment had been replaced by observation. For the first time, he was seeing people exactly as they were rather than who he hoped they would become. By noon, the living room looked normal again. The party that never happened had vanished without a trace. Ethan carried the final trash bag outside and returned to the couch. His phone now contained dozens of missed calls and unread messages. Most people would have felt guilty. Ethan didn't. Instead, he opened his contacts list. Then he did something he had never done before. He started counting. Not friends, not family, favors. He opened conversation after conversation. Loan requests, emergency requests, work requests, ride requests, relationship advice requests, technical support requests, moving assistance requests, dog sitting requests, airport pickups, last-minute rescues. The list seemed endless. Hours passed as Ethan scrolled through years of messages. The deeper he looked, the worse it became. A disturbing pattern emerged. Almost every relationship in his life seemed built around one question. What can Ethan do for me? Very few seemed interested in another question. How is Ethan doing? That realization hurt more than being forgotten, because forgotten implied accident. This felt deliberate. His gaze drifted toward the window. Outside, the neighborhood carried on as usual. People walked dogs, cars passed by, children rode bicycles. The world looked exactly the same as it had yesterday. Yet something fundamental had changed. Not the world, not his friends, not his family. Him. For the first time in his life, Ethan wasn't looking for excuses on behalf of other people. He was looking at facts, and facts were much harder to ignore. His phone buzzed once more. This time it was Marcus again.
Bro, really need that money.
Ethan stared at the message. For several seconds, his thumb hovered over the keyboard. The old Ethan already knew what he would have done. The old Ethan would have transferred the money immediately. The old Ethan would have apologized for not responding sooner. The old Ethan would have worried about hurting Marcus's feelings. But something felt different now. For the first time, Ethan found himself asking a simple question. What would happen if I said no? The answer scared him. Not because Marcus might get angry, because he honestly didn't know who would remain in his life once he stopped being useful. Ethan stared at Marcus's message for nearly a minute. Bro, really need that money. A simple sentence. Yet somehow it felt heavier than every message that had come before it. Perhaps because Ethan had finally started paying attention. His thumb hovered over the keyboard as years of memories resurfaced. Marcus had been his friend since college. Back then, they had spent countless nights discussing dreams, careers, and the future. Ethan remembered helping him study before exams. He remembered lending him money when he couldn't afford textbooks. He remembered helping him move apartments 3 separate times. Marcus often referred to Ethan as his best friend. The phrase sounded nice. The problem was that Ethan could no longer remember the last time Marcus had acted like one. He opened their conversation history. Months of messages stretched before him. Most were exactly what he expected. Need a favor. Can you help me out? Got a quick question. Can I borrow some cash? The further he scrolled, the more uncomfortable he became. Because the pattern wasn't occasional. It was constant. Years of communication revolved around Marcus needing something. Very little revolved around Ethan. Then he found a message from 6 months earlier. His father had been hospitalized for a minor heart procedure. Ethan remembered being terrified. He had texted Marcus that evening. Hey man, Dad's in surgery. Just need someone to talk to. Marcus had replied 22 hours later.
Sorry, bro. Busy day.
That was it. No follow-up, no phone call, nothing. Ethan sat silently staring at the screen. He wasn't angry. Anger required surprise. This felt more like acceptance. His phone buzzed again.
You there?
Another message arrived almost immediately.
Need the money, ASAP.
Ethan finally typed a response. Not a long one, not an emotional one, just honest. Sorry, can't help. He pressed send, then waited. The reply arrived less than 30 seconds later.
Seriously?
Ethan stared at the message. For some reason, he smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was revealing. He had spent years responding to emergencies, requests, and last-minute favors. During all that time, Marcus never seemed shocked by Ethan's generosity. One refusal, however, immediately triggered disbelief. Another message appeared.
Come on, bro. It's just 500.
Then another.
I thought we were friends.
There it was. The manipulation disguised as disappointment. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Part of him wanted to apologize. Part of him wanted to explain himself. Part of him wanted to send the money just to avoid the discomfort. That was the version of himself that had ruled his life for years. Instead, Ethan locked the phone and set it aside. For several minutes, he sat quietly. Nothing exploded. The sky didn't fall. The world didn't end. A strange realization settled over him. Saying no felt uncomfortable, but surviving it felt empowering. His phone rang again. This time it was his mother. After a brief hesitation, Ethan answered. "Hey, Mom,"
Finally.
she said.
I've been trying to reach you all morning.
Ethan noticed she hadn't started with an apology. Not a genuine one, anyway. No acknowledgement of yesterday. No discussion about missing his birthday. Just frustration that he hadn't answered quickly enough. "Was there something important?" Ethan asked. His mother paused briefly.
Your uncle needs help moving some furniture this weekend.
Ethan blinked. Of course, not "how are you," not "happy birthday," not "I'm sorry." Furniture, his mother continued speaking.
I told him you'd help. You don't have any plans anyway.
The statement landed harder than she intended. You don't have any plans anyway. The words perfectly summarized how most people viewed him. Available, convenient, as though his life existed in a permanent state of readiness for everyone else's needs. A younger version of Ethan would have agreed instantly. The answer would have been automatic. Instead, he surprised himself. "I won't be able to." Silence filled the line. His mother laughed lightly, not because she found it funny, because she assumed he was joking.
What do you mean?
"I won't be able to help." The silence that followed felt different, longer, colder.
What could possibly be more important?
Ethan almost laughed. Not because her question was ridiculous, because it perfectly demonstrated the problem. Nobody ever asked whether Ethan wanted something, only whether he was available. "Other things," he answered. His mother sounded irritated now.
Ethan, it's family.
For years that sentence had worked, as though the word itself erased every disappointment, every cancellation, every forgotten birthday, every one-sided sacrifice. This time it didn't work. "I understand. I still can't help." Another long pause followed. Eventually she sighed.
You're acting strange lately.
As if 24 hours of boundaries constituted a personality change. As if years of being overlooked hadn't been strange at all. They ended the conversation shortly afterward. When the call disconnected, Ethan sat motionless on the couch. His heart was racing. Not because the conversation had been dramatic, because it hadn't. Objectively, nothing major happened, yet it felt monumental. For 32 years, Ethan had built his identity around being agreeable, being needed, being useful. Now he was doing something unfamiliar. He was disappointing people, and they didn't like it. The realization stayed with him throughout the afternoon. By evening, another message appeared. This one came from Linda.
Can we talk tonight?
Ethan stared at the screen. For years, Linda had controlled the pace of their relationship. She decided when conversations happened. She decided when plans changed. She decided what mattered. Whenever Ethan expressed frustration, she found a way to convince him he was overreacting. Now, for the first time, he wasn't sure he wanted the conversation at all. That thought alone surprised him. Because if someone had asked him yesterday whether he could imagine life without Linda, the answer would have been no. Today, however, another question had begun forming. One he could no longer ignore. If someone genuinely loved you, should being with them feel this lonely? The question lingered in his mind long after the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, and for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't afraid of the answer. The following day passed more quietly than Ethan expected. After years of constantly responding to messages, solving problems, and making himself available to everyone around him, The silence felt unfamiliar. It should have been uncomfortable. Instead, it was peaceful. For the first time in a long while, Ethan spent an entire morning focusing on himself. He cleaned the house, worked on a manuscript that had been gathering dust on his laptop for months, cooked lunch, read several chapters of a book he had purchased almost a year ago but never found time to finish. Each activity was simple, yet strangely satisfying. It wasn't because the activities themselves were special. It was because nobody was interrupting them. Nobody needed a favor. Nobody needed money. Nobody needed a ride. Nobody needed Ethan to sacrifice his own plans for theirs. As the afternoon progressed, Ethan began noticing something that made him uncomfortable. His schedule had always been full, yet very little of it had actually belonged to him. Most of his time had been spent maintaining other people's lives, helping, fixing, supporting, accommodating. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped asking what he wanted. Ethan heard a knock and he froze. He already knew who it was. Nobody knocked like that except Linda. 3 quick knocks. Pause. 3 more. The pattern had remained unchanged throughout their entire relationship. For several seconds, he remained seated. A strange feeling settled over him. Normally, he would have rushed to the door. Today, he simply saved his document before standing. When he finally opened the door, Linda stood on the porch with her arms crossed. She was attractive. That much had never been in question.
Finally, I've been calling you for days.
Linda said. Linda pushed past him and entered the house without waiting for an invitation. She had always done that. For some reason, today it bothered him. She glanced around the living room. The decorations were gone. The cake was gone. Everything related to the celebration had vanished.
You cleaned up already?
She asked. Ethan closed the door behind her. What did you expect? Linda rolled her eyes.
I don't know. I thought maybe you'd wait.
Again. No apology, no acknowledgement, no accountability. Just an expectation that he should have waited. The realization became harder and harder to ignore. Linda dropped her purse onto the couch before finally looking at him.
Are you seriously still upset about the birthday thing?
Ethan stared at her, not because of what she said, because of how she said it, as though the issue wasn't what happened. The issue was that he still cared. I'm not upset, Ethan answered truthfully. Linda frowned.
Then why are you acting weird?
Weird. There was that word again. Apparently treating himself with basic respect qualified as strange behavior. Ethan slowly sat down across from her. For a few moments, neither spoke. Linda eventually sighed dramatically.
Look, I already explained what happened.
No, Ethan replied calmly. You gave an excuse. Her eyebrows rose.
What is that supposed to mean?
It means something always happens. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Years of frustration followed. Something happened on my birthday. Something happened at my book launch. Something happened on Valentine's Day. Something happened during dinner reservations. Something happened every single time. Linda's expression hardened.
That's not fair.
Ethan almost laughed. Of course it wasn't fair. Nothing about the relationship had been fair. The difference was that he was finally noticing. Linda leaned forward.
You know my job is demanding.
I do.
You know I can't control emergencies.
I know.
Then why are we even having this conversation?
Because for the first time in 4 years, he wasn't accepting explanations in place of effort. A memory suddenly surfaced. One he hadn't thought about in months. Last year, a restaurant reservation. A place Ethan had booked 3 weeks in advance because Linda wanted to try it. He remembered arriving early. He remembered waiting, then receiving a text, running late. 2 hours later, she canceled completely. That same evening, social media showed her having drinks with coworkers. When Ethan asked about it, she convinced him he was overreacting. Back then, he believed her. Now he wasn't so sure. The more he reflected, the more memories surfaced. Missed promises, canceled plans, forgotten dates. Linda eventually broke the silence.
You're making a huge deal out of nothing.
There it was. The sentence that finally connected everything. Every concern he ever raised became nothing. Every disappointment became nothing. Every hurt feeling became nothing. Everything that mattered to Ethan somehow transformed into an overreaction. And for years he accepted it. The realization struck him harder than any argument could. Linda wasn't treating him differently today. She was treating him exactly the same. The only difference was that Ethan had changed. That was why the conversation felt so different. Linda studied him carefully. For the first time since arriving, uncertainty flickered across her face. Not because she suddenly understood his pain, because she sensed something changing. People notice when a door they've relied on for years starts closing.
Ethan,
What?
what's gotten into you?
The question lingered between them. Ethan thought about it. Then he gave the most honest answer he could. Nothing got into me. Linda frowned.
Then what changed?
Ethan looked at her for several moments before speaking. For years, he would have searched for the perfect answer. Something designed to protect her feelings. Today, he simply told the truth. I got tired. The words were quiet, yet they carried the weight of years. Tired of being understanding. Tired of being patient. Tired of pretending things don't bother me. Tired of convincing myself people care when their actions say otherwise. Linda stared at him. For the first time since entering the house, she had no immediate response. And for the first time since the conversation began, Ethan realized something surprising. He wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the argument. Not of losing her. Because once you've spent years feeling lonely inside a relationship, solitude stops sounding scary. It starts sounding peaceful. The realization settled deeply within him. And judging by the uncertainty now visible in Linda's eyes, she was beginning to realize it too. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The silence that filled the room felt unfamiliar. Normally, whenever tension appeared in their relationship, Ethan was the one who rushed to erase it. He would explain himself, apologize, soften his words, find some way to make Linda comfortable again. This time, he did none of those things. He simply sat there. Linda shifted slightly in her seat. The change was subtle, but Ethan noticed it immediately. She was uncomfortable. Not because he had yelled. Not because he had insulted her. Not because he had accused her of anything. She was uncomfortable because she could no longer control the direction of the conversation.
You act like I'm some horrible person.
Linda finally said. Ethan shook his head. I never said that.
You're implying it.
No, I'm saying I'm unhappy.
That's the same thing.
Ethan stared at her for a moment. No, it isn't. Linda looked away first. The response seemed to catch her off guard. In the past, Ethan would have immediately reassured her. He would have explained that she wasn't a bad person. The problem was that reassurance never solved anything. It only ended the conversation. And every ended conversation became another unresolved issue waiting for the future. Linda stood and began pacing. Another familiar habit. Whenever discussions stopped going her way, movement usually followed.
I had a lot going on this week.
Ethan nodded. I'm sure you did.
I've been stressed.
I'm sure you have. Linda stopped walking.
What is that supposed to mean?
It means I believe you, she frowned.
Then why are we arguing?
Because for the first time, Ethan thought, believing someone's reasons didn't automatically erase the consequences of their actions. But he didn't say that aloud. Not yet. Instead, he found himself noticing something strange. The conversation had now lasted nearly 15 minutes. During those 15 minutes, Linda had explained her situation repeatedly. She had defended herself repeatedly. She had justified her actions repeatedly. Not once had she asked how he felt. The realization sat heavily in his chest. Even now, even after everything, the focus remained on her. He wondered how many times that had happened over the years without him noticing. Probably hundreds, maybe thousands. His thoughts drifted toward the beginning of their relationship. Back then, he genuinely believed he had found someone special. Linda had seemed fascinated by him. She listened to his stories, asked questions, supported his writing, encouraged his goals. Looking back now, Ethan realized most of that disappeared once the relationship became secure. Once she knew he wasn't leaving. Once she knew he would always be there. The effort gradually vanished. At first it happened so slowly he barely noticed. A canceled date here, a forgotten promise there, an anniversary overlooked, a birthday missed. Each individual event seemed small. The problem wasn't one event. The problem was hundreds of them. 1,000 tiny cuts eventually became a wound. Linda's voice pulled him back to the present.
I don't know what you want from me.
Ethan almost answered immediately. Then he stopped, because for the first time he wasn't actually sure. What did he want? An apology? Maybe. More effort? Certainly. A relationship where he mattered? Definitely. But even as he considered those answers, another thought entered his mind. Why should he have to explain basic consideration to someone who supposedly loved him? Linda sat back down. Her expression softened slightly. Whether it was genuine concern or simply a different strategy, Ethan couldn't tell.
Ethan,
He looked up.
you know I love you.
There it was, the sentence, the one that had always ended every disagreement. Words Ethan had clung to for years, but tonight they felt strangely empty. Not because he doubted she cared about him at all. He believed she did, in her own way. The problem was that love wasn't the issue anymore. Actions were. A person could say they loved flowers and still forget to water them. A person could say they loved a pet and still neglect it. A person could say they loved someone while consistently treating them as an afterthought. Words mattered. Actions mattered more. I know, Ethan said quietly. Linda visibly relaxed, as though she believed the conversation was finally ending. Then Ethan continued, but I'm starting to wonder if that's enough. The relief immediately disappeared from her face.
What does that mean?
It means love isn't supposed to be something you only talk about. Linda stared at him. It means showing up. Her expression hardened slightly. It means keeping promises. Now she looked irritated. The reaction told Ethan everything he needed to know. The conversation wasn't making her reflect. It was making her defensive. And people usually became defensive when they felt accused. The problem was that Ethan wasn't accusing her. He was describing his experience. The distinction mattered. At least it should have. Linda suddenly laughed, a short, disbelieving laugh.
You know what this is really about? You're upset because nobody came to your party.
The words landed harder than she intended. Not because they were wrong, because they revealed how little she understood. His birthday wasn't the issue. The missed anniversary wasn't even the issue. Those were symptoms. The issue was years of feeling invisible, years of convincing himself things would eventually improve. A strange calm settled over him. For the first time, he realized they weren't having the same conversation. Linda thought they were discussing one missed celebration. Ethan was discussing an entire relationship. One event could be forgiven. A pattern was something else entirely. You still don't get it, Ethan said quietly. Linda's expression tightened.
Then explain it to me.
He considered the request, then slowly shook his head. No. The word surprised both of them.
What?
I'm done explaining things that shouldn't need explaining. Linda looked genuinely stunned, not because the statement was harsh, because it was unfamiliar. And for the first time since Linda arrived, a possibility entered his mind that he could no longer ignore. Maybe the relationship wasn't failing because they needed another conversation. Maybe it was failing because one person had been carrying it for years, and he was finally too tired to keep carrying the weight alone. The thought remained in Ethan's mind long after it appeared. Maybe he had been carrying the relationship alone. The more he examined it, the harder it became to dismiss. Relationships weren't supposed to survive on love alone. They required effort, attention, sacrifice, consideration. Most importantly, they required both people to contribute. For years, Ethan had convinced himself that relationships naturally went through difficult periods. Every time Linda disappointed him, he found a way to justify it. Every missed date had a reason. Every forgotten promise had an explanation. Every cancellation had an excuse attached to it. Individually, each excuse sounded reasonable. Together, they painted a different picture. Linda broke the silence first.
What exactly are you trying to say?
Ethan looked at her. For a brief moment, he considered telling her everything. Then he stopped himself. Not because he couldn't explain it, because he already had. This wasn't the first conversation. It was the 100th, maybe the 1,000th. The reason he felt exhausted wasn't because she didn't understand. It was because she did. She simply never cared enough to change. "You know what's funny?" Ethan asked quietly. Linda frowned. "I spent most of this relationship thinking communication was our problem. If you can't see it by now, then it's pointless."
That's not fair.
There it was again, that phrase. Ethan wondered how many times he had heard it over the years, whenever he expressed disappointment. Somehow the conversation always became about fairness toward Linda, never fairness toward him. He leaned back against the couch. "Do you remember my book launch?" Linda hesitated.
What about it?
The hesitation itself answered the question. She barely remembered. For Ethan, it had been one of the most important days of his life. For Linda, it was apparently just another Tuesday. "You promised you'd be there."
I already apologized for that.
"Do you remember why you missed it?" Linda looked away. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she sighed and shook her head. Ethan wasn't surprised. He remembered every detail. "You went to a rooftop party with your coworkers." Linda's eyes widened slightly.
It wasn't like that.
Ethan almost smiled. Of course it wasn't. Nothing ever was. The problem wasn't the party. The problem was that she had known about the launch for months, then chose something else, the same way she always did. "You know what I remember?" Ethan continued. "I remember waiting. I remember checking the door every time someone walked in. I remember telling people my girlfriend was on her way." His voice remained calm, almost too calm. "I remember sitting there for 3 hours making excuses for you." Linda looked uncomfortable now, and for some reason, Ethan found that significant. Perhaps because it was the first time during the entire conversation she seemed affected by his perspective.
You never told me it hurt you that much.
The sentence nearly made him laugh. "I shouldn't have needed to," Ethan said. The room fell silent. Linda looked away. For the first time since arriving, she didn't have an immediate response. His phone suddenly buzzed on the coffee table. Neither moved. The screen lit up. Marcus. Again, the timing almost felt comical. The phone rang for several seconds before stopping. Linda glanced at the screen.
You're ignoring Marcus?
Ethan nodded. The surprise on her face was immediate. Another message appeared. Marcus clearly wasn't giving up. Linda stared at the phone, then back at Ethan. Something thoughtful entered her expression.
What happened to you?
The question was almost identical to the one she asked earlier, yet this time it sounded different, less annoyed, more concerned. "I think," Ethan said slowly, "I finally got tired of lying to myself." And for the first time since she arrived, Linda seemed to realize this conversation wasn't about a birthday. Now that illusion was disappearing, and judging by the uncertainty growing in Linda's eyes, she was beginning to understand that once some illusions broke, they could never be rebuilt again. Ethan spent years putting everyone else first. But what happens when he finally decides to put himself first? The answer changes everything. Subscribe and turn on notifications because part 2 is where the story really begins.